apologize. Thank you for bearing with us, with new technical setups and me not being the technical person. So now we have Kevin and everything should proceed much more smoothly. So, why don't we get started? And Eliza, would you be able to roll please?
Sure. Hold on 1 second. Okay. From Chester, Pat Band.
Here.
And I see Cindy Lignar joining us from Chester as well. And this is fun, but Bonnie's not with us because her grandchild is being born. So that's exciting. Clinton Abby Pearsall is here or was here.
Yep, I'm here.
Hi. Cromwell Stewart Popper is here. Deep River Daniel Smith.
Hello, here.
Durham John Board.
Hi.
East Haddam Jim Ventris is not here. East Hampton Roy Gothier I don't see. Essex David Rosengren
I'm here.
is here, and Carrie Duquez is here as well. Haddam Bill Warner not here. Killingworth Richard Planis. Hello. Lyme David Lam. I see.
Here.
Middlefield Jim Irish not here. Middletown Mark Kozakowski. Hello. Old Lyme Michael Fogliano.
With you.
Old Saybrook Carl Fortuna in the house. No. Portland Dan Beret may not make it. I don't have anyone from Westbrook. I also see John Guzkowski from various towns. And Courtney, I'm sorry, is it Fitzkey?
Yeah.
Portland Youth and Family Services?
Yes.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm Eliza Lopresti, and I can't really see who else is in the office. If you want to introduce yourselves.
And we got, who did we miss? Down this way, David Baum we have.
Yep.
And then we have Carla Lindquist.
Yeah, Carla Lindquist from Hope Partnership.
Liz Thayer is also on.
Yes,
I invite
I'm
her
sorry.
from River Authority.
I see her. Hello, Liza.
Hi.
And then also from River Cog, Susie Beckman, Megan Duquith, Kevin Armstrong, Sam Gold. All right, moving on the agenda, since we still don't have a chair or a vice chair, we are still recruiting for anybody interested. Just email Eliza or we will make your jobs really easy, I promise. But until then, I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can you, Megan, can you tell me who made that motion in second, please?
David Long.
Who was the second?
Me, Pat Bands.
Thank you.
Great. All right, thank you. So next up, moving right along, we have a really exciting speaker, the first in our what we're calling speaker series. At the beginning of forming this committee, we talked about wanting to hear from other actors in the housing space, nonprofit organizations, housing authorities, developers, who is out there actually getting the work done, who can work with our towns, what kind of work are they doing, how can we partner. So we have Carla here, who just stepped away.
She'll be back to the
Who will be back momentarily, and maybe Kevin, we can go ahead and pull up her PowerPoint while we wait for her. To give a little bit of a presentation, she is the Executive Director of Hope Partnerships. Some of you may be familiar with her and Hope Partnerships work. Hope has worked in a lot of our towns with great success. So I'm looking forward to hearing from her. Actually, while we're waiting, which towns are familiar with working with Hope Partnership?
We've had discussions with Hope Partnership.
Anyone else?
Presentation.
Well, I can just point out that Hope has worked in the towns of Essex. They've worked in, I want to say, Old Saybrook.
Saybrook.
Yes.
And they've also worked in, well, they've had projects that they've discussed in Old Lyme and Haddam and
Madison as well.
So without further ado, take it away, Carla.
So Carla Lindquist, I'm the Executive Director of Hope Partnership. I've been with the organization for about 14 months. My background is in public sector, both through the city of New Haven and also done some work for the ECD. I've also worked in a variety of nonprofits around the state. And so I was really excited to come to Hope. Is forward?
I'm
Is
glad
it
it's
not?
not just me.
Doing it.
then we just,
Oh, we might have to just do that, yeah.
Can we give her that?
I don't know if that'll reach either.
it may not reach.
It may
I mean, I can also move.
Yeah, do you mind moving up?
No, that's fine,
Yeah,
I
go
can
ahead.
switch.
Go ahead.
It's a day, guys.
I don't know what the range is in this.
Apparently that's past it.
We are,
We're doing great.
So, for anyone who doesn't know, Hope is almost 20 years old. I hope that everybody here will help us celebrate next year when we turn 20. I will say that the organization was definitely ahead of its time when it was founded. You know, here we are in almost 2024, and the conversation now is very popular around affordable housing, but in 2003, 2004, it was not as common to chat about it. But a group of concerned residents came together in Old Saybrook and said, we should do something about this. And I actually think that the anecdote that was told to me about one of the founders was really illustrative of the issue. So apparently one of the founders was driving down Route 1 in Old Saybrook, and she started to get very irritated because she was stuck behind a school bus. And it kept stopping, and she realized it was stopping at all the motels. And that struck her as problematic, as it should probably strike all of us, that there were children living in motels. So over the past 20 years, Hope has grown tremendously. It went from sort of a very grassroots local effort to increase awareness and advocate for affordable housing, to now we are a developer and an owner of affordable housing, in addition to, of course, doing advocacy and education work to get folks, better up to speed on what's going on and the resources available. As mentioned previously, we have two different communities that we wholly own. We own 16 units in Old Saybrook called Ferry Crossing. We own 17 units here in Essex, in Centerbrook, called Lofts at Spencer's Corner, which is right down the road. And then we are also the minority partner on a 31-unit project in Madison that's currently under construction. So, those are really the things that Hope does. We advocate, we educate, and we develop. I mean, that's sort of the meat of where our time is now, is in development. And then we facilitate. I think that this would be an example of sort of the facilitation work we do. We try to work with municipalities or different orgs to get them towards where their goals may be with affordable housing, even if it's not our model of affordable housing. And then we maintain ownership or ownership stake in the projects that we develop. I only mention that because some private developers develop something and then they sell it. And that's not Hope's model. I'm not saying that we never would do that, but it's just not right now part of our mission. And so, sorry this isn't lined up correctly. It did on my computer, so I don't know if it got lost in translation. But, one of the things that we often get asked is, how does a project come together? And, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, one of the primary drivers of a project is a location, is having a parcel that sort of meets all the criteria. And some of those criteria are free from environmental concerns, close to transit, a certain amount of acreage, the relativity to amenities and to a downtown or Main Street corridor where there's other appropriate density. Flood zones are a big thing that we deal with in our region. Unfortunately, that means that a lot of the available parcels that maybe someone would look at for a different type of development are not available for our usage because we cannot get certain funding buckets if we build in a 100 or a 500-year flood zone. And so the funding, that's obviously the next thing that has to come together for a project to be successful. Generally speaking, there are 3 funding buckets that we or other developers would use for affordable housing. It's a mixture of state funding, which is often passed through for federal funding, and then programs like tax credits, traditional financing, and then there's other types of funding like energy rebates and grants. Funding for us as an organization falls into 3 categories, which is pre-development work, the construction, and then operational. We're a very, very lean organization. I'm the only paid employee and I'm not even full-time. And so, you know, I will say that I think compared to a lot of organizations, you get a lot of bang for your buck with Hope in terms of operations because we just are extremely lean. And the last thing, and probably sort of the thing that's at the center of our ethos is really this focus on community. So we try to do projects that are not sort of imposed or introduced to a community as a project that they have to accept, but as something that comes out of the community, right? We try to work with residents, orgs, town government to sort of envision what the perfect project would be in the location that is feasible. And you know, I think by and large we've been successful and maintained that reputation of being a very sensitive and responsive organization to what community wants and needs are. And just to get a little bit more specific on a couple of our projects, there's always at least a couple of people who really want details on what projects look like and how they're structured. So at Ferry Crossing, we have 16 units, and those are income thresholds of 25%, 50%, 60%, and 80% of area median income. It was completed in 2012, and Hope actually did this project with a development partner, but we bought out that development partner a few years ago, and so now we wholly own the project. The way that this land acquisition is structured is that it's a long-term land lease with the town of Old Saybrook on land that was originally conveyed to the town from the state of Connecticut. For lofts here in Centerbrook, so we have 17 units, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units for income thresholds of 30, 50, 60, and 80% of area median income. It opened in 2021. It was our first project as a solo developer, and I have to say that, you know, I wasn't with the organization when they did it, but it is amazing that they were able to do a very complicated project during COVID and delivered it essentially on time and on budget. That's really, really impressive. And again, on sort of bare bones staffing. This is a really interesting project, and we like to point to this for other communities that are looking at ways to fit affordable housing into their smaller towns, because it's an adaptive reuse. I think most people here are familiar with, you know, the building that the buildings, it's actually a cluster of buildings that Lofts is located in. It was previously all commercial and retail condo, and now the 2nd and 3rd floors mostly are residential. They're part of our project Lofts, but then the bottom floor are still separately owned commercial and retail condo. And then,
So could I just ask a question? On
Sure.
the Spencer's Corner, the bottom is that's not affordable housing, that's just retail.
it's commercial and retail condo owned separately.
And I take it you're at 100% occupancy on the residential. Is there a waiting list?
We, yeah, I'll just tell you, generally speaking, we have waiting lists for every single unit in our portfolio. Some are longer than others. I also field calls and emails almost every single day, look from individuals, we track it, separate individuals looking for housing, and that doesn't include the people who call me every 3 weeks asking if the Wellington application period is opened. The market is deep and extensive.
Just one more.
Sure.
So rentals, not,
All rentals, that's our
not
model.
buys?
Yep,
Okay.
yeah,
all right.
that's our model.
Is that the same with all of your projects? They're rentals, not buys?
Yes, our
Okay.
model is just rental units.
Okay.
Yep.
'Cause okay.
So Wellington at Madison is currently under construction. We are working with a development partner on this called the Caleb Group. They're out of Massachusetts. They work across New England. They have a couple of other projects in Connecticut, but they're mostly in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. This will, when it's finished, it'll be 31 units for 25%, 50%, 60% of area median income, and then there actually will be also 7 market rate units in this particular project. And 4 of those units already exist on site. They're already built, they're occupied. People have lived there for several years. And this is an interesting project because it's a mix of new construction and historic rehab. So we're looking right now at the Henry Josiah Meggs barn, or house, actually. People call it a barn because it's red. And so it keeps being referred to as a barn, but it's actually a home. And that's an 1808 historic home. And we're maintaining the exterior, and it's going to be retrofitted into 4 one-bedroom apartments. And so this will be 1 and 2 bedroom units, and it is scheduled to be completed in late 2024.
The other 2 ferry crossing lots, those are 100% affordable,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
Can you also just step back? What is the area median income again? So just so I can get a sense of the actual dollars involved?
So we operate in more than one
Oh, right.
calculation
Okay.
district. But I will say, generally speaking,
Yeah.
in this area of Connecticut, it's over $100,000.
But that's lower across the river in London County, isn't it?
I think it may be a smidge lower, yeah, because they include New London proper.
Norwich.
Yeah, we don't have any actual projects
So
there,
it's
so I haven't had to calculate it,
Hovers
but
around 100,000 is the median?
yes.
Okay.
Middlesex counties go more like 90s, I think.
I think
No, or
at
did
this
it go
point, yeah, so they change every single year.
Yeah.
The federal government does a recalculation every single year. I'm pretty sure that both areas where we currently operate are in the $100,000 range.
And that's for a family of 4?
Yes, yes.
So the way, again, just to make it practical for me, so I get it. So if your income is 25%, let's just use 100 because it, it's easy.
It's a nice
to
round
divide.
number, yep.
So if your income is 25,000 a year, you're eligible for that particular unit.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And if your
Wow.
income is $25,000 a year, you're actually eligible for all the units. It's just
Right.
we wouldn't want to.
No,
certify you into-
overburdened to-
right,
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't
exactly.
want to pay 60% of your 25 grand for
right,
housing.
yeah.
Right.
I only make that clarification because occasionally folks who are looking for housing think that you have to fit very narrowly into the bands when it's not that restrictive.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Can I ask a question about
Sure.
that? Let's see, when you do have a waiting list, if someone has a lower income, do you go towards lower income applicants first, or is it first come, first serve? How do you?
So it's first come, first serve,
Okay.
but we maintain wait lists for each type of unit. So if you are interested in a 1-bedroom unit at 25%, you're on that specific wait list. There's not just one wait list where then we call you and it's a 3-bedroom at 80%, but you're, a person who's looking for a different income band restriction. So generally speaking, you see longer wait lists for smaller units at the lowest income AMI restrictions. The higher end and the larger bedroom units are the ones that are in less demand. I won't say they're not in demand, but they're not in as much demand. And that's because, you know, even the difference of a few $100s a month really makes a difference for folks who are, you know, concerned about their housing costs. And so, you know, adding that extra bedroom, even if you've got several people in your family, can be really, really tough to do.
While we're on that topic, are you aware of any giving preference to people that live in the community first? Is that something you can do?
You can. So there are, it depends on your.
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
If you take federal money, you
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
Federal money, any resident in the United States can, has equal opportunity for that unit. But if you don't take a federal grant, then you might be able to restrict it.
Yeah, but Sam, does federal money change its color if it goes through the state, or does it maintain that?
Ooh, those strings will stay attached.
Okay,
So-
because you said most of the state money is really federal money
Yeah.
washing through the state.
It depends. It all depends on what those original strings are, and the state is bound to those, so they would make it clear.
Okay.
But yeah, it is. If federal money is involved, those strings will be attached. It is possible. Let's say if the town was to develop a project and wanted to give preference to town residents, that might be legal if it's town money. But federal money, it's generally not legal.
Okay.
I would also just mention for reference that it's actually really probably not something that towns need to do or worry about, because much like other people who are low to moderate income want to live either where they live or, near where they live. So generally speaking, what you'll see is when there's a new project, the vast majority of the people that apply will already live in that town. And then you'll see the next towns out will be the next highest level of applicants. And then you'll see, 1, 2 applicants from random places. But generally speaking, people want to live where either they already live or where they have friends and family or they
Or where
lived
there's
before.
a good school system.
That may be a
I'll tell you that anecdotally, that's something that I think a lot of existing residents worry about in their towns. It's not something that the data necessarily bears out.
Okay.
So you're saying most are not families with children?
Most of our residents are not families with school-age children. But I also think it's important to, I think one thing that really struck me about this, and I have 3 small children of my own, so this sort of hit home to me, is in the Partnership for Strong Communities housing conference last year, one of the panelists for a panel that I attended said, what does it really say about us as a society if we don't want children around? And I think that sort of
No,
really,
we need children.
Right, yeah.
My town, we're becoming an old age home with trail systems.
Totally,
And-
yeah.
I think we're all there.
Yeah, and we need children, but we also we're a volunteer town. We have
Sure.
all our emergency services are volunteer.
Sure.
We have some specific needs in that community
Sure.
that people coming in with children may not be willing to fit.
Sure, yeah, and I think I just mentioned that because I think it's an important sort of more social-based thing to consider, and I, generally speaking, try to stick to the data and sort of how our built environment is impacted, but, I think it's just something that I like to mention to folks, and again, for towns that may be having that calculation be part of their decision-making process, another really important thing to think about is capital repairs on your schools. I know a couple of towns are very concerned about their declining school population because they've also got very old buildings, and they know that the state of Connecticut will send them way less money for upgrades because of their declining school population. So just another calculation, in respect to children. But I will say that by and large, what we've seen, not a huge number of folks moving with school children. But again, it depends on your unit size. So we have mostly 1 and 2 bedrooms, and you know, if you have 3 children, you're probably not gonna move into a 2-bedroom and certainly not a 1. And so what are we working on currently? So we're currently doing due diligence on 3 potential project sites. We also are searching for a parcel in a specific town where we have a private donor who is looking to donate funding for land acquisition for a project. And then we're also the semi-finalist for the Pearson School redevelopment RFP in Clinton. And actually Abby's on here now, and I saw her last night at our interview, so. And the other part of our work is community responsiveness, so being here, talking to folks like you, doing the work that you're doing. We provide a lot of information and resources to other developers and people who are interested in getting involved in this work. I've had several CDCs or community development corporations approach me recently about how to get started, what to do first. And then we also work with towns one-on-one, sort of just about strategy and things that they want to do. You know, we're referenced in several of the affordable housing plans from this district. And so, you know, we know that we're a resource and we want to be available as that resource to folks.
Oh, click the screen because I had to admit somebody. Go ahead, now you can go.
Okay. And then sort of generally speaking, because another question we get is what can towns do to facilitate an organization like ours doing work in their town? One of those things is obviously zoning. You know, we have to use multifamily zoning districts, but I also encourage towns to think about duplex, triplex, and quadplex as of right. It's not something that would benefit us as an organization because it's not the type of development we do, but it can in the long run impact your general affordability of your town from a housing perspective. It can help with density for transit purposes. It's a great strategy. Property tax abatements. So, you know, we have to do these sort of one-off because most small towns don't have programs. When you're in larger cities, they have tax abatement programs for development, but we usually have to negotiate these one-on-one when we're doing a project. It might be helpful if towns contemplate if there's a program they can put into place proactively. It might be attractive for developers. Land banking or allocation. You know, we have seen towns come out and be very interested in this recently. Towns in this region have done it for a long time for open space and for other purposes, but we're starting to see that as a strategy that folks are really wanting to employ so that they also have some control over where the affordable housing goes. And that's something that is important to towns when they're thinking about their plans of conservation and development. And, you know, we understand that and think that can be a great strategy for towns that can do that. And infrastructure, this is one that I think people think is more prohibitive than it actually is to development, or at least the scale of development that we do. We do a small scale development that can, in most cases, be served by septic and well water. But, you know, having municipal water, having a sewer is, of course, going to make it easier for any developer to do this work and cheaper. And the last thing is, of course, think about whether there are any grants you can give, either for pre-development work or maybe there's some sort of, you know, other type of funding that you think you can leverage in your town, whether you've got foundation or whatever it is. Those are the other things that tend to make a difference. Because even small pots of money can sort of offset random costs that could be otherwise prohibitive. And I just want to say thanks very much, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions that folks have. I know that we answered several during the deck, but happy to keep going if it's helpful.
Just a question about how you allocate to the different levels of AMI.
So it's based on being competitive with funding. Okay. So CHAFA and DOH and their scoring structure obviously favor more heavily lower income bands. So if you come in with a project that's all 80% of AMI, you're unlikely to score well. They're not going to prioritize your project. So that's part of the reason, but we also, as a nonprofit, have a mission to do that work, to have deeply affordable. But I think in general, if you're looking at other developers, they're doing it for scoring purposes.
So what about how, like, the lofts? Did you set aside 25% at the 25% level and 25% of the units at the 50% level?
Oh, you're asking
and-
about how many units are in
Yeah,
each mix?
how many units? I mean, do you have a formula or do you kind of move them around a
You
little?
can kind of move them around. So
Okay.
in our case, they're pretty evenly distributed.
Okay.
So I will say that in Wellington, even though we've got 7 market rate units in that development, we are very heavily, to have, just 25, 50, and 60 is really deeply affordable. And we've actually got 7 25% units, which is a good chunk, because they're obviously the hardest to make work from an operational pro forma standard. So it really, it depends on the project, but
Okay.
yeah, you can kind of move them around, and
You
that often,
do have a little bit of flexibility, so sometimes it might be a 50% unit and sometimes it might be a 25% unit?
well, you can't change it after the mix has been determined.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay,
sorry,
so that's
sorry if that was
established,
confusing.
no, I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know how to ask the question that I'm
Sorry.
asking.
Sorry, yeah, so you can't, it's not fungible after the project's done.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can't change it afterwards. We couldn't decide, oh, you know what, actually, we wanna do all 50s. That's not possible. But, in the pre-development process, you probably will see a couple of different iterations of the unit mix, just because tweaking it here and there can affect the pro forma long-term.
Okay.
So, sorry about that.
I have a couple questions, but just one for, so how do you start in a community? Who makes the first move? Do you guys find the property, or do you have somebody in the town comes to you?
Both.
Okay.
So it depends on the opportunity. So we have parcels that we actively seek out and try to work on just because they're fantastic options, but we also increasingly are seeing towns and private organizations coming to us and saying, we really want to do a project here.
Well, that's because we're just 2 years, we've learned about this,
Right,
so.
right.
And how do you sell it to the community? What are the steps in that?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say about that is that, it's my understanding and experience that over the past 5 years, the receptiveness to affordable housing has really changed dramatically as the public dialogue about affordable housing has changed. And I think the wildness of the real estate market in 2020 that is showing no signs of abating here in Connecticut has made a lot more people sensitive to housing cost concerns. Whereas in 2018, you might have had a lot of folks who thought affordable housing, don't need it in my town. Those people may actually, right now in 2023, be concerned about them needing it, or their son or daughter to move back, or their best friend, or their mother. And so we've seen a lot of sort of more personalization of this concept that in a lot of cases I think is turning the tide for public receptiveness. The other part of that is that I think at the elected official level, and of course there's lots of officials here, and I'm sure that they could weigh in with their personal perspective on this, but one thing we've heard is we know this is coming and we want to be proactive as opposed to reactive. And so we want to do this in a way that works for our town as opposed to it being imposed upon us. And so that's the other part of it. And I think that the public, even folks who are reluctant, can understand that perspective, even if they're not as sensitive to the first.
Have you guys given any thought to changing the affordable term? Because that still comes off, I think people view it negatively. Has there been any, I know they've tried the workforce housing and all that, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think we, as an organization, we've had discussions about, what type of language we use around this type of work. I would say generally speaking, I haven't heard of as many folks being sensitive to affordable. I don't personally love workforce because I don't think it fits that well in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases we see seniors who are retired, which they're not workforce. They're in our housing, which is totally fine and still fits our mission, but it doesn't convey accuracy to the public. But we have done some workshopping around what the right messaging is, and I think that our organization is sort of in a unique position where after 20 years of doing this work, we have a little bit more experience tailoring that message to exactly what a community might be receptive to or might be sensitive to. And to your question, you know, we have an entire education and advocacy committee that works through a variety of different channels. One is the faith community, to sort of come in, just explain more about affordable housing, what people can expect, what it really means for their town. And that's one of the strategies that we employ. Sure.
Any other in-house questions, or let me see if I can.
Get out of there.
Yeah.
We can play musical chairs again. I'll switch
Oh,
it
yeah,
to-
sorry.
No, you're good. Now that I can see everyone's faces, any questions from the Zoom folks? All right. Thank you so much, Carla. That was a really great presentation, and I think really helpful for a lot of us, trying to wrap our brains around all of the components of creating affordable housing. And hopefully you will continue to join our meetings.
Yeah, probably gonna be great.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. So next up on our agenda, I believe we have a discussion about regional housing authorities continuing from our last meeting. I know that, Eliza, am I correct, Portland is no longer?
Yeah, I know Alan is on vacation. I don't know if Courtney, you were just checking out the group, or if you were gonna talk about anything.
No, I'm just checking out the group.
Okay. And Liza Thayer is here from Deep River Housing Authority.
Yeah, we're also just checking out the group.
Well, can I put you on the spot, Liza, and ask you to kind of explain a little bit, or Dan, if you wanted to jump in at all?
I can talk a little bit about it, and then Liza can fill in the blanks. Essentially, the Deep River Housing Authority, as explained to me by Joanne Harrigan, who is the current director, was started in '93, what is today Kirtland Commons. It's a 5-member commission, and I believe the term is 5 years. Originally, it was 26 units, and then in 2016, they received funding for another 16 units. So now they have a total of 44 units at Kirkland Commons, and Kirkland Commons is it's for elderly and disabled. And Liza, maybe you could tell me, does it fall under one of the 8Os specifically, or not?
It's it's a CHAFA project. It was part of the elderly portfolio for the state.
And so so currently the Housing Authority manages those units, not just operationally, but also they make sure they provided, I don't want to say entertainment, but other functions.
Yeah, we do a lot of recreational things on the side.
Recreational, yeah.
We have a grant that we get to provide like recreational things for the residents.
And they are always looking to, they have ideas to expand, but funding and location have just not come to fruition yet. So those things are always on the horizon. And that's pretty much what I have in a nutshell. Eliza, if she wants to add anything else.
I think you pretty much got it. I guess if there was any questions, I could answer them, but.
Do you have an income breakdown like the other, like the whole partnerships, or is age the primary factor?
Yeah, so we're like very low income. So I think for a single, it's like 46,000 a year, and I think I just looked it up for a doubles, like 50 to 52,000 is the max for tenants.
So low income is another layer on top of elderly and disabled.
Yeah, they have to meet like the income limit when they apply.
Are all the units elderly?
It's elderly disabled, so you either have to be collecting social security or social security disability to be able to be on our list. If you're under 62.
And I believe there is a waiting list, isn't there, Liza?
Yeah, it's like a 3 to 5 year wait typically to
Yeah.
get.
So we definitely have a need for
Yeah.
expansion.
And we only open our wait list once a year in June. Because we get such like an excessive amount, we can't keep it open all year long.
And so did I understand that correctly? You're actively looking to expand your portfolio?
Yeah, we're always kind of just like looking to see what could be possible, but right now in Deep River, there's not much opportunity. for that. Yeah,
We only have so many, so much open area in, the
Yeah.
village. And so, currently there's just nothing to work with. But things may come up. That's why we're always looking to see if a lot comes up or somebody wants to turn something around.
Hopefully this group can be of help for that as well. All about networking, finding the opportunities, right?
Does anybody know how many housing authorities there are in the state and what? Because I know I used to live up in our area. Torrington Housing Authority is a big one. And I was wondering if there were other, if they're more concentrated in larger populated cities as opposed to smaller ones.
I think we talked about that at 2 meetings ago when we discussed housing authorities. I
That's
don't
the one I
remember the
missed.
number. though.
Sorry.
Do you remember?
I don't remember the number in the state. And
Yeah,
also we were trying, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead, Megan.
I was gonna digress, so please, if you have an answer.
I was gonna say that we looked only at our region. We didn't look at the state, but there were many of our towns did have housing authorities in some form or another. Not all of them active.
Right, and that's kind of where I was going. We were also trying to wrap our brains around what the breadth of operations are for a housing authority, because it seems that they all administer HUD programs, but some of them also manage property portfolios, and it kind of expands from there, other activities that they can take on. So just trying to, that's part of the exercise of talking to the different housing authorities operating in our region to understand what they're actively doing. And maybe we also expand, to your point, to other housing authorities outside of the region operating in the state to see what they're doing and if there's anything we can model after.
I was reading more about housing authorities. It said the distinguishing thing between that and a housing committee is housing authorities they own or manage assets, right? That's the distinction.
Do they all own and manage assets though? They at least all administer HUD funds, but I don't know if they all operate a portfolio of properties.
Deep River
Yeah, I
does.
don't think that all of the ones in our region did. But that is a distinction between the two. They can.
And one other, we had talked about the possibility of doing like a regional housing authority. But so I think where we landed was they would need to change statutes or something on them in order to do that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. We are not actually allowed currently by statute to create a regional one, although there is the opportunity for towns to agree collectively to do things together. So I'm not entirely sure where the balance of that lands, where the statute ends and, private agreements among parties begins. I don't know, John, do you have any ideas on that? I put you on the spot, I'm sorry.
Well, I would want to look into the statutes a little bit more, but there is a broad authority in the municipal statutes that allows towns to cooperate on any number of things. So I think if towns came to an agreement that, Essex and Deep River and Chester will all collaborate and I'll make properties available and sit on the board of the Deep River housing authority, I don't think the statutes would stand in the way of that. I think, perhaps there might be something goofy in terms of how HUD might allocate things, to a property in Essex that's really Deep River Housing Authority. We'd have to get past that, but just in terms of cooperation, I'm sure towns can do it.
So what's the benefit of being a housing authority versus being a nonprofit HOPE? Do you administer HUD funds at all? I mean, are you limited in what you can do?
We don't develop certain types of housing, so we don't do any, so we accept Section 8 vouchers, just like anyone who, has rental housing would, but we don't administer Section 8 housing projects, which, to Megan's point, is a whole different bucket and comes with a lot different restrictions. And it's, I think there are pros and cons. One thing that occurred to me when this conversation started is that, a lot of housing authorities have development arms. So they have a related entity that does their development work, and then the housing authority maintains its portfolio, does the management, and then, is bound by any statutory requirements there. And so that's something that you could look at doing regionally, is you can have all these housing authorities be members that have a development arm and a separate entity governed by them.
So say, for example, in Spencer's Corner, you do accept Section 8 vouchers.
Yeah, everyone who provides rental housing has to accept a voucher.
Gotcha.
Legally.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're happy to do it, but just
Sure.
to know that everyone has to.
I didn't realize that's a requirement. So if you have a candidate, if you own rental property and you have a candidate who comes in with, or a potential renter who comes in with Section 8, you're required to accept that.
You can't deny them on the basis of their
of
Section
that,
8.
yeah,
So-
okay.
And I will tell you that across the country, receptiveness to folks with Section 8 vouchers varies wildly. So places that have excess housing or that have generally low market rents are much more, you see private landlords much more excited about the prospect of a Section 8
Okay.
voucher recipient. Here in the Northeast, there have been lots of regulatory challenges around enforcing landlords' acceptance of
Yeah.
Section 8 vouchers, because there's such a dearth of housing that a lot of landlords would prefer not to have to deal with it,
Yeah,
and would
okay.
prefer someone who's just paying, out of pocket.
Yeah, but someone with a Section 8 voucher can't go to a market level, $3,000 a month apartment and say, here's my $1,000 voucher, and you gotta take that as your complete rent.
Of course, no, yeah, and I'm not suggesting that. But the issue is just to that point, you just can't deny someone on the basis.
Right,
of
on the
being a
basis of that.
Section
Are there a lot of regulations around, in terms of what the property owner needs to do regarding Section 8?
There are inspections that go along with it.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering if there's a burden on the property owner in terms of
don't-
accepting that.
I don't have great details. We don't do our property management, so I can't speak to that, but we have a third-party property manager. But what I will say is that I think in general, it has been more of a soft challenge as opposed to a hard challenge,
Okay.
meaning that there's stigma and perceived red tape, more so than, actual red tape. Although I do think, to David's point, there's like slightly more complicated to receive vouchers than to have someone walk in and
Right,
pay their
okay,
rent in
yeah.
cash.
All right.
If I
No,
if I could just speak for a minute, this is Joanne Horrigan. I'm the executive director for the Deep River Housing Authority. I'm here with Liza. So Section 8 vouchers, part of the, there is a stigma, but there is a little bit of responsibility on the landlord's part. When you accept one, you have to be inspected before the tenant moves in. The unit gets inspected by the whatever vendor is the state of Connecticut is using to come out and make sure that the apartment is up to par. They're checking things like that as a landlord, you're doing your part. And I think that sometimes is one of the reasons that private landlords don't also participate, because they have to have their smoke detectors have to be working properly, no leaking faucets, appliances, if you're providing appliances, they have to be operational. Evidence of like leaking ceilings can become an issue. So I find I have a lot of landlords that call me about it when they've had somebody approach them. And I think there's an educational piece that is missing. Every unit at the Portland Commons is inspected anytime a new tenant moves in. It doesn't matter if a tenant has lived there for 1 month and then unfortunately passes, that unit will be inspected before the next person comes into it. And that's for the state subsidy, rental subsidy, but that also applies to Section 8. There's also a little bit of paperwork that has to be filled out, but it's not much. It's very little. And the rent is based on rent reasonability based in our area. So if you have a 2-bedroom apartment, it's going to be based on what amenities are offered, if there's security system, if there's washer dryer on the property, all of those things help to determine what would be a reasonable rent for Section 8 based on how many bedrooms the person has a voucher for. So Section 8 is not really a bad thing. It just requires a little bit of commitment on the landlord's part, which honestly, if it keeps units in a condition that is safe and sanitary for tenants, that's how it should be.
Absolutely. I would think the other side of it too is that if you have a Section 8 tenant, the money's coming in, right?
Generally they pay a portion. So the tenant pays a portion and Section 8 pays a portion. And yes, you do. And my experience is most people that have a subsidy don't want to lose them. And Section 8 is usually a portable subsidy. So it's not attached to the unit, and that person has choice. If it doesn't work out living in one spot, they can find another landlord. But it's kind of like getting the golden ticket on, American Idol. You've got that, you're not going to let it go. So I find most people, live up to it. That's been my experience. And we don't normally take Section 8 vouchers because we are fully subsidized. However, at times we do, because if somebody, they would have to lose it if they came into our property and took our state subsidy that was attached to the unit. So CHFA has allowed us to accept the voucher versus the subsidy that's on the unit.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for our speakers? All right. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. I think we've answered some longstanding questions from a few meetings. I really appreciate it. Moving on to our next item, the Pro Housing Grant. So I'm going to give a little bit of a preview, and I'm going to start with, we're having a public hearing on this tonight at 6 o'clock. It's hybrid. I believe Eliza sent out an invitation and information about this a few weeks ago. So hopefully this isn't all brand new news to everybody. But
You want to show?
no, I'm going to give a presentation this evening. So I'm going to give a brief overview as kind of a preview to hope that you all will come to the hearing tonight and offer comments for us or consider commenting on our online portal. But I am going to be giving a full presentation this evening, so I'll reserve that for 3 hours from now. But I'm going to use it from my notes. So basically, HUD put out a grant. It's the Pathways to Removing Obstacles for Housing. I apologize, my notes are not coming up here. There we go. The purpose of the grant is to identify and remove barriers to affordable housing production and preservation. The total grant amount is $85 million. They're looking to give out between $1 and $10 million grants. The operation period is over 6 years, so it would start January 2024 and run through September 2029. at our last COG meeting, because MPOs were strongly encouraged to apply, and because we have already done so much great work in terms of a regional approach to affordable housing, we got full support from the River COG board to move forward with an application for this grant. So the breadth of the grant is really broad. It can be for planning, it can be for development, it can be for infrastructure to support housing development, and it can be for preservation of existing affordable housing. Our particular approach is to look at up to 6 area-specific plans in the region. And we would use our regional plan of conservation and development and our regional housing plan as a basis for identifying those locations. We have not done that yet. That's going to be part 1 of the proposal, is to work with the towns to identify what those locations might be. But because we're using the regional plan of conservation and development and the housing plan as our basis, we know that they are going to be areas that already have a degree of population density. They're going to be areas where there's already clusters of jobs. There's going to be areas that have good access or good potential access to infrastructure such as sewer and water, or good septic capacity, and good access or potentially good future access to transportation options. So phase 1 of the plan is going to be looking at 6 areas across the region with some geographic spread. So, both sides of the river, north, central, south, and conduct an assessment of those areas to determine the capacity. What is the amount and mix of development that could possibly occur there? So that would include looking at terrain, looking at infrastructure, looking at what the important environmental considerations are before moving forward. With that in mind, we would move into phase 2, which would be the visioning and public engagement phase. So we would work hand in hand with the town, with the commissions, to conduct public engagement, to do a visioning exercise. What do people want to see built on the site? What can all of the commissions that would have implementation authority get behind? And is this serving the need for the town, for the region, of the housing that we're missing? Based on all that feedback, we would create build-out scenarios. We would have a couple to choose from, and we would do more public engagement to select the best scenario based on all the input and draft a plan for the creation of that scenario in the area. Then phase 3 would be the regulations and implementation. So we would work closely with the planning and zoning commissions in the towns to develop a series of regulations that would allow the implementation of the area-specific plan. So it would involve reviewing the current locations, seeing what in our vision wouldn't be able to be created as it stands, and then making those changes as necessary. And that would be followed by kind of a marketing and outreach component to get partners on board to start soliciting the development in accordance with the vision and the regulations. And then concurrently running through all of this, we propose the creation of a regional land bank that would function in those 6 areas primarily, and then if it's successful, could potentially expand to further operations. But the purpose would be to manage a portfolio of properties, acquire properties, maybe brownfield sites, to clean the sites, to clear title to the sites, to hold on to the sites, to work with the right partners and developers to allow for the development in accordance with the area specific plans. So, as I said, that is kind of that's what we're proposing. The grant application is due on October 30th at 11:59:59. So before we all put our costumes on for Halloween, it has to be submitted. There is a requirement in the grant, in the NOFO, that we put this out for public comment, which we've had it posted. We've received 2, I believe, so if anyone wants to put comments in, we would greatly appreciate it. And then we have to have a public hearing, which we're having tonight, and I'll give my fancy presentation that you have mostly heard at this point, but I still suggest that you come join us in the office or via Zoom to provide public comment for this project. And then hopefully we would know by November or December whether we receive the grant. But as far as I know, and Eliza, maybe you have more recent knowledge on this, we are the only applicant in the state of Connecticut right now.
Oh,
And we have full-throated support across the board, letters of support from OPM, letters of support from DECD, CCM, AMPO, home builders, who else? All of the representatives.
Oh, I have a whole list if you want to hear it. It's pretty impressive. I'm excited about it. CCM, AMPO, Chamber of Commerce of Eastern Connecticut, Bike Ped Advisory Board for the state. Some of these you mentioned. I have bipartisan representative support, federal delegation support, Partnership for Strong Communities, Mercy Housing, Home Builders and Remodelers Association of Connecticut, Eastern Connecticut Association of Realtors, etc. And more are coming in.
So this is for our cog though.
It's for the whole region. Well,
Our region.
I should correct this. So Rivercog is putting in the application, but the plans are gonna be specific to the town. So you could kind of see Rivercog as the capacity builder for the town.
Right, but it would only be applicable to the towns within the
Rivercog,
Yes,
17
correct.
towns of
Correct.
Rivercog.
Yes, that's correct.
So we could apply to Rivercog for a share of this?
If you have an area that you want us to look at, and it's an area that's in our plan of conservation and development as one of those like targeted areas where we want more housing, then please submit an area. And by submit, I mean, just let me know. And
But again, this is going back to it, it's federal money.
it's federal money, yes. So the requirements for the grant, and actually the impetus for this grant funding came from the American Planning Association, which was really pushing HUD to give more money to local communities to do ground up planning. And so, you know, for us as a region to be competitive, we kind of consolidated, we want 6 areas across the region so that we can compete against larger areas. But Rivercog really is the capacity builder to allow for that ground up planning. And that, if you read through the NOFO, that really seems to be the priority, is giving local governments the tools that they need and the funding that they need to make the changes that they want to make in order to allow more housing. And the only thing that they're asking for is that these projects are allowing for the creation of more housing than is currently allowed now. So there's not a number of specific units that need to be created. The target is 100% AMI, which I think we could beat that. We know we need it, but that's where the parameters are. So they're very broad. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
I want to say it sounds very exciting. As I mentioned, we're motivated. We just need to find a parcel or a lot that works with everything. So we'll definitely be thinking of you.
Yeah, we're looking for, so it's not gonna be, I mean, parcels are good, but we're really looking for general areas too, instead of just one site. Because the focus of our regional plan of conservation and development is really on infill. So if there are areas that you think are underutilized, or maybe have a lot of legacy brownfield sites, or are adjacent to your town center that you might want to kind of incorporate better into your town center, those are kind of the areas that we're looking at.
The challenge is Deep River's tiny. We're just a little town.
Megan, if we would get the grant, when would you be ready to start executing it?
So there is a whole schedule and timeline as part of the proposal, and I have us starting in mid-February. So we get it January 31st, and assuming we can get a quick turnaround of all the contract engagements, just hit the ground running. And it would be kind of a revolving door because it's up to 6 areas over 6 years. So the way we kind of envisioned it was having a 3 or 4 consultant team to handle different aspects so that we can keep it moving as one finishes.
I have a procedural question. How does the public hearing fit into the approval process? Because, I mean, it's just a public hearing. I mean, everybody gets up and says, I like this, I don't like this, but how does HUD treat that? Do they get a video of the public hearing and look at it? Or
That's
listen
a
to it?
really great question and something we've been trying to figure out as well. Because if you make any material changes to your application, you have to repost it and have a new public hearing with a 15-day public comment period. So they only gave us about a month to put this together. There's really not time for 2 rounds. So we were trying to figure out the same thing. What I think they're trying to do is kind of a litmus test of, are people really anti this project in your area? And if they are, then maybe it's not worth us giving money to
But
you.
how would they know that?
So we have to
to
write
report?
down,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So we'll transcribe what we
Okay,
hear.
all right.
We also are receiving written comment, so we'll have that. And
Right.
what we've done for our planning efforts in the past is a response to comments sort of table. So
Right.
we'll put all the comments and then we'll do a response to each of them of how we plan to address it.
Yeah.
And that way we're not making material changes to our application, but they can still see that we are reflecting on what we've heard. And
When does the public comment period end?
Eliza, do you remember how long we're carrying it? Is it to the 27th?
27th, yep, that's
So
Friday.
You said you've received 2 so far?
So
Are they
far.
good or bad, favorable?
They're
unfavorable?
good. One was Susie and one
Very
was John.
Oh, okay.
We were testing it.
Well, now that we know,
Yeah.
so,
Well, that's
So-
great. That's fantastic amount of work and just
The fingers crossed.
hats off to you all for doing that. Yeah.
Thank you. And what we would hope from this group is, ideas for locations too. Areas, if there's anything going on. I know I was thinking Mariners Way and Old Saybrook would have been a good one, but they already got their plan underway before we were able to grab it. So,
Somebody
Yeah.
mentioned to me the other day, and I don't know if this makes sense or doesn't make sense, but we have Bocum's Corner, right, in Essex, and the what do you call it? The Keystone business there was a grocery store, and it ain't no more. And somebody mentioned, would that be an ideal place for affordable housing? That whole corner. I don't know how many acres are involved there, other than the actual footprint of the stores in the parking lot, but I think it's a little bit bigger than what you've got there. But anyway, just throw that out if you're thinking about places that,
that's interesting.
I don't know if it fits the bill or doesn't fit the bill.
Yeah, we'll look
It's an
into
interesting
that.
thought.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Megan, this is Carrie. That parcel, David, that you're talking about is just under 4 acres. But I'm wondering, at what stage are you interested in getting feedback from the towns as to which parcels would be of interest? And are you including that in the actual grant application, or would you just be creating a pipeline for if we receive the grant?
Yeah, we're not including it in the application because we want that to be kind of the first phase is identifying the areas. But on the back end, while we wait to see if we get the grant, if there are good ideas already, I would love to already have a list ready to go.
Right, okay.
And then we could spend, phase 1 doing more of the analysis and less finding of locations.
Would part of the grant also be working with towns on maybe amending any zoning regulations so that it would allow for this housing to exist?
Yes, exactly. So the idea would be first to identify the areas. And again, we're talking like an area plan, so not necessarily just one parcel, because part of our plan of conservation and development is, the vibrant, walkable, kind of mixed use locations for people to live and work and so on. So we're looking for kind of a circle polygon area that we could look into. And so it would be first, what is the capacity in that area? Second, what is the vision for the area? And then creating a plan. And then third would be creating the regulations that would allow the plan to be built.
But how does that work for a town like Lyme? We don't have walkable, we don't have a town center, everything you mentioned, we don't have.
Yeah, so we might have a tough time finding a spot in Lyme if you don't want to create those things. That might not be.
I can't create a town center.
Yeah.
I can't create a rail line or a bus line.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that could be something we could talk about if, there is a location where you would want to create more housing. If you had an idea in mind of a good specific location for that, then we could talk about how that could fit into the project.
Okay.
I don't know the answer off the top of my head without knowing what the area might be, but if you have ideas that could fit, then I am all ears.
Okay.
Where is the public hearing?
Here, or virtual.
Oh, okay, so you're not expecting it, hopefully you're not expecting a huge crowd.
We weren't until yesterday. now we might. We had some less than enthusiastic feedback at our RPC meeting yesterday. Minimal.
Which meeting, I'm sorry?
Our regional planning committee met yesterday, and I gave the same preview, and there was a little bit of misinformation out there, and I think it's okay now, but I am concerned that there might be other misinformation going on about what this project is.
Were public invited to your regional planning thing too?
Well, it's a
People
public
showed up?
meeting,
It
so
was a public-
technically.
So people showed up?
There were people in the audience that didn't say anything, but we did have committee members express some concerns, but they weren't concerns that were accurate. So that's my concern, is that there might be misinformation because it's a HUD grant circulating around about what it is.
Can you give us an example of misinformation?
There was concern that we were going to be building on preserved open space.
Oh, yeah.
Which, is not anything that we are promoting whatsoever.
Well, the courts would probably have something to say.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and our regional plan of conservation and development is very heavily focused on infill and leaving all of the virgin land alone. So that, and then there were concerns about what type of building, people were asking for plans of already designed projects. What is it that I'm going to see built on this site, even though we don't necessarily have a site or a project yet? So like I said, it was misinformation. I think the fact that it's HUD threw some people off. But I think we were able to correct the misinformation, and we'll do the same today if it comes up.
And I would just like to add that I think some of that misinformation came from people not actually reading the grant before they were maybe like emotionally reacting to it. And so if you look at our website, it's a long grant application, but there is a short executive summary that kind of sums it up for you, which is basically what Megan just told everyone about, but it's there if you need to see it. Like I do better reading things than listening to them myself. So it's on rivercog.org/prohousing.
All right.
So it's 6 o'clock tonight.
It's 6 o'clock tonight.
Well, I'll cross my fingers that you get that grant, because I definitely think Deep River, we'll find something. We'll find something.
Yeah.
It's in our POCD. It's what we want to do. It's just establishing the location.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know, we're ready to go.
I appreciate it. I thought this group would be supportive. If there's no other comments on that, I'll go on to the next item on the agenda since we are already after 3. So we'll keep moving. The website and toolkit updates. So I'll start with the toolkit, and Kevin, you can pull up what you've been working on for the website. But we're working right now on cleaning up the materials that we've already put together. So the ADU spreadsheet and one-pager, and also the inclusionary zoning spreadsheet and one-pager, so that we can get that up on the website. We want to make it pretty. We have already found it useful for some towns. So I'm glad that it's, at least on an ad hoc basis, been of use, but I would love to get it up on the website for wider circulation. We are looking for our next item to look into, and based on previous conversations, I think we are looking at the conversion of single-family units into multifamily units. I think that was something that was of interest. And Eliza and I had started looking into this, and it became clear that it's not really going to be a one item solution like the other ones were. It's not like you just look up, single family home conversion and you get a list of things you need to do. There are going to be multiple levers that need to be pulled. I believe something about the building code came up, where it kicks in with different requirements if you're looking at, say, 2 units versus 3 units or 4 units, and that was a hiccup. So I was hoping that I could hear from some towns, and maybe not on this meeting, maybe you reach out with an email to Eliza and I, who have had success with conversions from single family to, say, a 3 or a 4 unit, even a 2 unit. Just let us know how that process works for you, what are the hiccups, and we can kind of take it from there and try and have a spreadsheet or some sort of graphic for everybody for the next meeting. So that's more homework than anything, but if that's good with everyone, that's what we'll look into next. For the website, Kevin has been putting together, the next item in our data dashboard. It's very similar to what we showed you for the housing data. But we're trying to get together the housing data, but also the population and demographic data, as well as employment and jobs, so that you can see it in real time by town over time. So Kevin is a mad genius and was able to pull all this together.
Did that go to everybody? I think that went to everybody. Okay. So I just popped the link in the chat. I like nice short links that you can actually say in plain English as opposed to long garbles of numbers. So I created an unofficial home that's on RiverCog's website where you can find these dashboards and play with them, because part of this process is getting a larger group of folks to actually play around with this and possibly break it. We're making all of this in-house, so if you come across something that's off or doesn't work, I would very much like to hear about it. But you can go to that website, and it's very, very simple. It's just 2 links on a page. It's very bare bones. It's just so I could get it up there and get it out there. But this is the one that we most recently put together, and it's population data. I'm gonna make it full screen so I can see everything. So from here, if you choose a town and a year, it populates various population census data for that town, breaking it down into specific categories, age groups, male and female. There's 2 different forms of it, mainly because you can choose multiple towns and multiple years, and it'll populate out that information in aggregate. It's adding everything up, but it'll allow you, if you wanted to, graphically to compare town to town, or if you're just interested in your own town, you can see multiple years of your own town as they stack up, and what those numbers are. So
Based off of census data?
this is census, yep, census information. Particularly, it's the American Community Survey.
Yep.
That's part of census, but it's like a subdivision that focuses on specific metrics. But you can also select all, and then the screen gets really busy. But one of the things that's interesting as a region is just to see what the overall breakdown of age is. And I think we all already know what our breakdown of age is, but this is
Old. Is that on there?
this allows you to see it. But yeah, feel free to go to this website, rivercog.org/data, and play around with that and give us some feedback.
So as I mentioned, we are trying to get these up for demographics, for jobs, for housing, basically everything that we covered in the existing conditions report for our regional plan of conservation and development. We want it on a dashboard in real time to help us all kind of, one, collectively work from the same base of knowledge, and two, make our planning efforts much easier so that we don't have to go and dig this up every time we need to do something.
The whole, I'm
I
sorry.
was gonna say, you put it in the chat there, but
Yes.
can you email it to this group?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
course.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah, just rivercog.org/data, but yeah, we'll include that in an email out to everybody.
Very
and then-
helpful. I just want to say, because recently we've had discussions and some of the data, like in the affordable housing plan, is from,
The Warren group.
2019 or
Right.
something, and people are talking different numbers. So this is great.
The
Thank you.
hope is, based on the way I've set it up, is that this will continue to flesh out. So we can
Yeah.
continue as new data comes in, add it on top of this, and it'll continue to build and allow folks to see trends over time.
So when was the last year for numbers that you have in there?
So I have back to 2019, blanket on the name, John McDonald, thank you. John McDonald, our John McDonald is working furiously in the background to actually pull all this information together, because if anyone in this group has ever been to the census website, it is a disaster. It's very hard to find precisely what you're looking for. So he's doing a yeoman's job of actually going through and combing that out and parsing out, because it's also shows the entire state. We're really just focused on our towns. So he's going through the larger data sets, combing it down to just the information we need. He gets it to me, and then I can massage it even more to get it to work in a web-friendly manner. So it's a task, but we're chipping away at it.
Yeah.
And hopefully this, depending on what is put into these dashboards, it's a little more digestible for someone who just wants to answer a question, who doesn't want to sift through all of that. And while I'm on that thought, this is just what I came up with. If you have certain specific questions that you want answered, like a data point against a data point, so it's, I can't even imagine what that would be, but what type of comparisons you'd like, I can create a chart or a graph for it and throw it up there. For now, I'm just focusing, like Megan said, on what we had already had so that we can track that. But if there's additional metrics that we didn't cover in those plans, I'm more than happy to hear about it.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Kevin.
Okay, we're getting,
I know,
Yeah,
fewer
we're
and
dropping off.
fewer and fewer.
we're losing folks because of time, but yeah.
All right, updates from members. Anything anyone wants to talk about briefly?
Jeremy?
I have an update. I'll be quick. You guys have heard me give the update on the affordable housing project that's underway in Chester right now. The application was opened, well, first of all, it was filed under 830G. It was opened in July. We had the first public hearing in September. We had a follow-up continued hearing in October, September, October. It has been continued to this Thursday, so this is the third public hearing. It is expected to be closed and the commission will begin deliberation at that point. They are actually up against deadlines that are in the process outlined, and is it the site plan process or whatever, there's certain amounts of time that have to be met. So they are up against that. The developer actually granted a 4-day extension for that.
What's the mood of the hearing?
Give me one moment and I will share that. So, the developer, in response to feedback, did make some modifications to the plan. They reduced it from 40 units to 36. It is 100% affordable, all of them. They moved a driveway line 8 feet to avoid having to cut down trees in response to the neighbors and move it further away. And then there was a bunch of other things as well. And my understanding, and I don't see John on there, but my understanding is that if you looked at it today, they meet all current zoning regulations except for zoning. I'm sorry, except for density is the only one they don't meet. So, having said that, our concerned residents of Chester Group is still in full force and they are still going at it. And there is quite a bit of information going around the town, not all of it accurate, but it is what it is. So we shall see what happens, but stay tuned.
So you said it didn't meet the density requirement,
Density.
but does it, it doesn't have to, does it, if it's a 30?
It does not, but I'm saying
Right.
if they did not file a 30G and they just
Right,
used the
and-
normal
right,
process,
yeah.
it would have met everything except for that.
Except, yeah, well, that's.
That shows a developer that's trying to work with the town.
Yeah,
Yes, so anyway,
the saga continues.
the saga continues.
Thanks for the update.
So I'll report on Essex, because we had a similar.
Yes.
But it wasn't an 830G, and maybe Carrie, if you want to, I'll defer to you.
We lost her.
Oh, okay, so you're gonna have to, I'm your delivery system, whether you like it or not. So we had 2 public hearings, each lasted about 3 hours. There had to be, to copious notes, there had to be 50 people who stood up to the microphone to comment. I would say 90% were opposed to this plan. It was quite an experience because I got appointed even as an alternate to Essex about 2 years ago. And I came with no experience at all, figuring I'd learn, and I have to a certain degree. I think I've made it to 5th grade now. But it was quite an experience because I never thought there would be that kind of opposition to what this developer wanted to do. Now, I know in the text amendment, stage, you're not supposed to talk about the actual project, but the guy had a project plan that he showed, before we had to put it away before. And it was a beautiful plan, actually. And the developer is well known up in Mystic, but upwards of, I'd say, 120, 130 people showed up both meetings for the public hearing.
Really, that many? Wow.
And one after the other. Now, the irony was that the group that started this was called Save Rural Essex. Well, we all know Essex is not rural. Essex is a suburban town. But because you can stand maybe in an open field and maybe not see another house, maybe, because I've now driven all over town and you cannot stand at any place in Essex without seeing a house. Okay, and most of the, as you probably know, most of the communities are packed tight. Because it was all built before there were zoning laws. So I was quite frankly shocked at the opposition. And it was, I don't want to take up too much time, but it was one plan over off 154 going to Old Saybrook. And it was on a 20-acre piece of land where they were gonna put, or 10 acres where they were gonna put a little bit more than 10, where they're gonna put about 20 units. And, and notably, the two streets that are abutted on either side are in a zone, are in our rural residential, where you have now a 2-acre minimum. But none of the people in that zone around that place have anywhere near 2 acres. They're all 0.95s, if that. And it seemed to me like it's just this attitude that, you know, we've got ours, and now we're just gonna lift up the drawbridge. And I was, quite frankly, you know.
Disappointed?
Disappointed, yeah, very much so.
What was the argument? Was it property values? Because I heard that, but,
Okay.
you know, were there certain arguments that came up?
Save
over time?
Rural Essex was the banner.
Yeah.
And that didn't have anything to do with reality, so when you
Right.
when you start out with a premise that doesn't have anything to do with reality, you end up into some strange places, right? And, but all of the comments, and I took notes, the most comments you got were about traffic, water, and after that, it was not very much, but it was a lot of traffic and a lot of this idea of, well, we gotta keep Essex quaint. Well, this has nothing to do with keeping Essex quaint, because everybody's talking about quaintness, we're talking about Main Street, you know, your little idyllic movie set town. It has nothing to do with the suburb out, you know, that looks to me like near where I grew up, not where I grew up, but it looks like Scarsdale out there. You know, that's what it looks like. And it was to me quite disturbing, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It's gonna be hard, because when you get that attitude, which is I've got mine, we can't let anybody else in. It's very hard to buck that public wave, and you know, it's like Lincoln said, if I have public opinion on my side, I can accomplish almost anything, but without it, you can't accomplish much.
My brief experience with P and Z, though, that people will come in with sentiments about all different types of things. For example, when we're looking at doing cannabis regulations for a store. But the fact of the matter is it really has nothing to do, I mean, if density is an issue, it's an issue, and that's the end of it. It's, I mean, by the regulations, people can say they don't like something or want something or traffic, they can ask for a traffic study, but they really can't hold up City Hall in that way.
Well, they did.
Oh, yes,
You know,
it
they
can.
did.
It doesn't mean they won't sue.
Oh, I say they won't try, but I mean, if they would have voted, I mean, the reason being, going back, particularly if it's 8:30, is you can vote it down as, even if everybody on the commission was against it, right? Not a public sentiment. That's the whole point of this. It'll just be overridden. If the developer sues, then you lose all control of it. I mean, I referred to like so our P and Z went through all the process of creating all the regulations for if somebody wanted to have a cannabis shop or whatever. And there was nobody even petitioned. And we spent like 4 meetings at like 3 to 4 hours a piece of everybody telling us how cannabis is a gateway drug. And whether it is or is not was really had nothing to do with the fact that we were just trying to come up with rules as to what to do with it. And so ultimately we voted it down. But that means if somebody comes to town right now with a permit, we have no regulations. Like we couldn't even get regulations put together because people were upset about wanting to do something like that. And I see that as a parallel to this affordable housing. You know, they don't want it in their backyard, but unless there's a actual violation of the zoning, I mean, they can yell and scream about it.
Well, there was though, because in it was a text amendment. So it was a 2-acre in our residential RU zone. It's 2-acre minimum right now.
Mhm.
Now, nobody in the zone has 2 acres. Maybe 2 people have 2 acres and a couple of people have 10 acres. But the vast majority of them don't have 2 acres. So legally, we could not do it without a text amendment. And they were opposing the text amendment.
Well, that's a way, that's a way to oppose it then, yeah, that's,
That was the problem.
Yeah.
And I was actually quite surprised because I thought the developer had worked with the town for about a year to come up with a text amendment that at least the developer and the people who worked with the developer thought would be palatable, and it just got shut down completely.
Because that was the second time it came up, right? Wasn't that same project discussed years before and turned down?
About a year before we had, during the correspondence portion of the meeting, we had just a look-see. The developer came to us and said, would you guys be interested in something like this? Because if you guys say, don't come, don't darken our doorsteps, we won't come back. And everybody on the board said, no, we'll be willing to listen to you. And so they spent a year developing this plan. And it got, like I said.
I'm in
we had
favor
something
of
recently.
affordable housing, just not next to me.
Yeah, we had some affordable housing related, so the bank in our village limit has just been basically a school bought it from Essex, right? But we had to create a text amendment to say, well, are we gonna allow schools in the village? But exactly what you're saying is we couldn't talk about the project because people kept wanting to say like, well, we don't want that. We only have a very small commerce area and there's nothing against schools, but we don't want that. It could be affordable housing upstairs and then shops downstairs. But yeah, just because it wasn't allowed to be talked about in the text amendment, they allow, so the first meeting was allow educational institutions into the village. And then of course, the next one, then there was no violation against the zoning. So that's, then, we had to let them go through. And it's, I think it's great that we have the school. What's that?
I see the public sentiment being the biggest barrier. You can get all the way, to your planning, and you can get the plan on paper and all of that, but you're gonna fight every time. You're gonna fight against people who got in under a different set of rules, and now they don't want anybody else to get in under a different set of rules. So that's what it boils down to, for me anyway.
That sounds fair. We certainly have our work cut out for us.
Yeah, I think the public sentiment that like I said, we have a waiting list at the Deep River Housing Authority for Kirtland. It's looking at the angles. I mean, I guarantee if somebody came in and said they wanted to do a bunch of cluster housing or something that was only only 2 units out of 10 we're going to go for affordable, that wouldn't fly very well. But if somebody came in and said, oh, elderly housing, it's that's a large part of our population. If if you look on the data sheet that he just demonstrated, and so it's all how it's pitched, I think, is to get past. That was earlier in the meeting. It's like calling it workforce housing or even affordable housing is everybody thinks we're gonna be putting projects up like dominoes.
Yeah, that's why for our pro housing application, public engagement is a really hefty chunk of what we're proposing for our budget, is really getting in there in the nitty gritty from start to finish, and trying to build support all the way through, but not saying that's gonna be easy.
Well, again, I think that's it. You talk to people, if you say you're doing a senior community, with walking and it's gonna be shops, it's gonna be like, Florida's villages, but just off the river, that's going to be a lot more palpable than we're going to try to bring families into, the zones.
Right.
Because people always think the worst, and we need them. The schools and everything else.
Yeah. All right. Great discussion. Any other updates before I move on to the next agenda item? Which is the last agenda item, and it's mine, so I'm going to be very quick. The Thriving Communities program. So we're working on it. We are still in the phase of creating the technical scope. I have met with our consultant team. The first part of that project, if you recall, it's for TOD. Hope is a partner on that project as well. We're looking at doing TOD around the 3 Shoreline East stations and the Middletown Transit Terminal. We're still looking at the first part of that right now, which is a land capacity analysis, very similar to what we're proposing for pro housing. We met with WSP's technical wastewater specialists about how they would propose to do a land capacity analysis, which gives me a lot of hope for how this can work for all of our towns, looking at first, what the current land capacity is, what the current septic system that are in place are, what the current regulations require, and seeing what can be built under those circumstances versus if tweaks were made, what could be built under those circumstances, and using that as a basis for the next stage of visioning. So that's where we're at. We have not done any actual work on the project yet. We're still in scope development, but we're working on it. And that, I believe, was the last item. So if there is nothing further, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. This was a really great meeting.